Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Thanks for tuning in live here. If you're watching this later, trust me, you're going to enjoy this. Do you want to hear about the floods that come way before Noah? Yes, this is controversial to some literalist fundamentalists, but to the academic world, this is kind of old news. And so I have two academics with us. One is has a master's degree, and the other one is a PhD. But go ahead and introduce yourself. So that's all I know, and I don't want to mess anything up there. Dr. Joshua Bowen and Megan Lewis, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you for having us, Derek. It's nice to see you. So I'm Megan, for those who don't know me. I am a podcaster and YouTuber, and also an Assyriologist, which is what I'm doing here today. I have an undergraduate degree in ancient history. I have 2 master's degrees in ancient Near Eastern studies from the University of Birmingham in the UK and the Johns Hopkins University. And for the past 5 years, I have been running the Digital Hammurabi YouTube channel and podcast to try and bring knowledge about the ancient world to people who made different choices and decided not to spend a decade in grad school because they had common sense. Let's put it that way. So yeah, that's what I do. Josh.
I mean, she left off this small detail about how she's the host of the Bart Ehrman Misquoting Jesus podcast.
I am that. Yes.
That little detail. She always forgets that one.
But it's not to do with Assyriology, so
It's just, it's just a little detail, right?
Yeah.
Of course. No, that's fantastic. And you're running a great program over there. In fact, coming across you and Dr. Josh a couple years back made me also want to be more serious about scholarship and about quality work, cutting edge quality academia, and bringing that to the public. I hope people watching this will subscribe to Digital Hammurabi, will go to the website, digitalhammurabi.com, where you can pick up their book or books. They're plural.
There are several.
Right? You have merchandise as well that I know people are going to want to check out, and they'll enjoy that and stuff. But the latest, greatest, and we're going to cover this in depth today, is Learn to Read Ancient Sumerian, an Introduction for Complete Beginners, Volume 2. And so we're going to dive into this. But before we get into that, we got to tease people. We got to give them a reason. Why would you want to learn Sumerian? And maybe we should start somewhere further back. Do you have anywhere you'd like to begin?
Yeah, so for me personally, one of the things that first really got my attention about Mesopotamia was having a history lecture in my undergraduate degree with a professor called Alistair Livingston, who was a fantastic Assyriologist. And it was a very entertaining speaker. But one of the things he covered in our first lecture was the fact that there is this flood narrative that predates the Bible by a long way. And that was really, really interesting to me. I'd been raised Christian. I was very familiar, obviously, with Noah and the flood. And I was like, whoa. And my 19-year-old brain said, oh, that means the flood must have happened. And I'm glad to say my thinking has evolved a little bit since I was 19. But that really kind of grabbed me. And then when you get a little further into Assyriology as a field, and you find out some of the reasons behind why other people get into Assyriology, it kind of starts to click into place. Assyriology started essentially because people wanted to understand the Hebrew Bible better. There were people going out and excavating in Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and finding all of these things that were kind of similar to the Bible and looked really interesting. And obviously it's the area where the Neo-Assyrians ruled. So you've got that connection. They were like, oh, this is fascinating. And then there's Abraham, who is said to be from Ur. There's a city in Sumer called Ur. People are like, oh, this is so cool. This is proving the Bible right. This is amazing. And then there was a British Museum excavation, and I have the date if I can find it no, that's the wrong page.
I don't want to put it, but I'm guessing while you're looking, 18 something, but go ahead.
No, I can't find the exact one, but yes, 18th century. No, 19th century. I was
thinking 1800s.
Switch 1800s to 19th century as a professional historian still trips me up all the time. But there was an excavation run by the British Museum in Mesopotamia, and they brought back a load of cuneiform, which is the beautiful stuff behind our lovely faces, the writing of Mesopotamia. And one of the tablets they brought back was a fragment, like half a tablet, of what they translated to be a flood narrative, clearly predating the Bible. And everyone got really, really excited. And this amateur Assyriologist called George Smith ended up getting funding, taking another expedition back. Specifically, like, his funding was given to him so he could go and find the other half of this tablet. And for anyone with any kind of archaeological experience, any understanding in how archaeology works, that's genuinely like trying to find a needle in a haystack of like the size of a football field. And he did it. He found the other half of the tablet. He brought it back to London and kind of really kicked off this not quite Mesopotamian mania, but the really strong interest in Mesopotamia, both as something connected to the Bible, but also as a field of study in its own right. So yeah, you learn all of that and you're like, oh, okay, so this is interesting. People started getting into it because of its biblical connection, but actually the cultures and the languages are just fascinating in their own right. But having said all of that, I think it's really, really important, if you're going to be looking at the Hebrew Bible, that you try and have some kind of understanding of the background that it was written in. And Assyriology and Sumerian and Akkadian is all really, really important for getting that understanding. That was a very long answer. I kind of monologued for 5 minutes. So Josh, you should, you should monologue now.
I think the show's over. Josh, great.
Yeah, for real. No, I don't know if I have anything to add. That was a great introduction.
But let me just tease people too. Like, I love what Megan says here, because I know that Josh also got into this. And by the way, Josh, we haven't even brought, I have so many interviews with you. We haven't brought out, because we still have the courses, all that stuff's coming, but also your personal testimony goes into what Megan's pointing out. Like, some people get into this. Josh got into this as a fundamentalist and was like, I'm going to really go and show God's words the truth. And well, let's just say this: it might be better to just remain ignorant if you want to keep your knowledge. But you figured out, like, hey, this is older, and there was a huge controversy, I think, when this stuff first came out. As I was reading about it, I heard the Bible Babel controversy, things like this, where people were going, no, they're not older than the Bible. Like, this was the resistance in the field for a while, and then eventually we start to. It's like evolution, right? Like, you start to go, oh, what are we doing? We have to figure out a way to adopt these ideas into our minds somehow. So your book is Sumerian, which is an extremely old language. And I thought, yeah, the Bible borrows from Sumerian. And Megan the other day was like, it's a little more technical than that. So what can we go into this?
We absolutely can. And please stop me if I can go too deep into textuality. So the way that people and cultures use and reuse and adapt literature is one of my favorite things in the world. So it's kind of something I will talk about for a very long time. But what you have with the Hebrew Bible is, it's not plagiarism. Really hate that word. It's not plagiarism. It's taking what was probably a common cultural idea, something in the background of the cultures in that whole region, and taking it and reworking it to do something very, very specific. And
can I give an example? There's a show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is one of our favorites. And Ray Holt, the captain of the 9-9, is very straight-laced, robotic sort of guy. And he's sitting in a car. I can't remember who he's sitting with, but he makes a rhyme. And he says, look at that. I'm a poet and didn't even realize that I was rhyming those things. Now, all of us, when he said, I'm a poet, we just filled in the rest in our minds, right? And didn't even know it, right?
Yeah.
And so when he started to say, and didn't even know, you're this is how genre works, right? We anticipate what's coming. So when he changed it at the end, the writer was doing something very, very specific, because Ray Holt is somebody that his character wouldn't actually know that saying, right? And so but that's the point. That's not plagiarism, as Megan is pointing out. That's not plagiarism. What it's doing is it's bringing the audience with you and tweaking what they hear, sometimes with really big tweaks, right? But it's bringing the audience along, playing off of their anticipations based on the genre, and then changing specific things or twisting specific things. And we'll talk about this quite a bit tonight, but there's a lot that goes into this flood story. And you wouldn't know those the polemics that are involved if you didn't have the Sumerian and Akkadian stories.
If you weren't familiar with the written texts already kind of in existence, and you see a lot of general connections that people can say, oh, well, it's just like human experience. We all know about floods and we all know about boats, and okay, fine. But there are some very specific instances of borrowing, especially if you look in the Gilgamesh section. So the flood narrative exists in several different forms in Mesopotamia. And if you look at Gilgamesh, tablet 11, that preserves one of the later flood narratives. And it includes things like 3 birds being sent out to find land, and 2 failing and then 1 succeeding, and fantastic, congratulations, the flood is going down. And like you can maybe explain like a bird, but 3 in...
and just so that if people are interested in this, in volume 2, I have a chapter, did the Old Testament plagiarize, or something to that effect, and we actually go through these flood examples.
That's a different book, isn't it?
Yeah. Huh?
It's not in the...
No. In the Atheist Handbook. What did I say?
You just said volume.
You said,
yeah. I'm so sorry. Of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. But I have a chapter on this intertextuality thing. And as Megan's pointing out, it's not just like, there definitely is like a parallelomania, right? That like the Golden Bough, and like we know about this in history. And so you start to see connections everywhere. And while there probably are, in many of those cases, where the human brain likes to see patterns, right? But when you start to see things like this Hebrew word only appears here in this flood context, in this specific part of the flood context, but it's a very common word in Akkadian that shows up specifically in that flood context in the same place.
right.
Now you're having to, the coincidences are starting to build up.
Yeah, I love that about your books and how you break that down. So I want to just say, please check out their works, get the book on how to learn Sumerian, because I guarantee you it can come in handy on understanding the kind of connections we're seeing over time from these myths. And who doesn't want to know, just being able to read these stories? They're really vibrant.
It's the world's oldest written language. So you've got bragging rights over anyone who can read Latin or Greek. To be perfectly honest, it's like, you can read Greek, fantastic, congratulations. Did you know that's like ridiculously late as far as history goes?
Yeah.
You're just very, very late to the party.
Right. We're talking about old. And so I guess to tease everybody, because there's going to be people who are going to come in and go, no, the Bible did not borrow from. Is there any linguistic stuff we can get into that helps connect these myths or tells us these are older, or I don't know, in some way you can draw some of those connections to the Bible?
Yeah. I mean, the first one is just archaeology, right? I mean, and this is not something that is debated, just so that it's clear. It's not something that's debated in academic circles, even evangelical academic circles, like Lawson Younger and James Hoffmeyer and Richard Averbeck. they're not gonna fight anybody to say no, the Hebrew Bible, the flood story there, that's what that's what Atrahasis borrowed, and they're not going to say that. So it's an interesting historical development that we see, because we have Sumerian becomes a written language right at the end of the 4th millennium BCE, and you start to see literature develop at the beginning of the 3rd millennium, and then it starts to kick off a little bit more in the early dynastic 3A period, which is like the first half of the 3rd millennium. But then you sort of have this development over the rest of that millennium, and you start to get really what would become very, very popular literary texts like the Curse of Agade, and they develop throughout the 3rd millennium. What's interesting, though, and actually there's a book, I pulled it off the shelf just to come up here. Chen's book on the primeval flood catastrophe. He's making the argument that, and I think convincingly so, that you don't actually have a flood tradition enter into the literary corpus until the 2nd millennium, the beginning of the 2nd millennium. Now, everybody listening might, go, who cares, right? And I don't blame you, right? Who cares about that? Well, if you're a fundamentalist evangelical, you should care. Because most people that take the Hebrew Bible quite literally, like a fundamentalist would say that the flood, the worldwide flood, swept over in the middle of the 3rd millennium. That's a problem for any number of reasons, right? Outside of science,
of course.
You have clear Sumerian culture, both archaeological, textual, you name it. We have it right on through the 3rd millennium. So right on through the time that this worldwide flood was supposed to kill everybody except 8 people. But what's interesting about the flood tradition is that there's really nothing in the 3rd millennium about this flood tradition. It's only 500 years later than what fundamentalists would say this flood swept over the globe, that all of a sudden you start to get different streams of traditions, both in Sumerian and Akkadian, developing in what's called the Old Babylonian period. And so, to sort of distill that down just a touch, we have a Sumerian flood story, specifically that comes from. We have a copy, at least one. There might be 2 other fragments that are parts of it, but from the city of Nippur from the Old Babylonian period. And then we have the Akkadian story of Atrahasis, which I'm sure people that are watching this channel know Atrahasis, reasonably well. And then Gilgamesh Tablet 11 pulls sometimes directly from Atrahasis. And then you have other mentions of the flood. So just a good example of this would be there's a poem of the early rulers that talks about when the flood swept over. One of the later versions in the early 2nd millennium of the Sumerian king list has the flood sweeping over, and then the city of Kish begins to rule. So, but it's a tradition that begins in the early 2nd millennium from all the evidence that we have. And there's a really interesting way that the stories not so much differ with one another, although there are obvious distinctions, but the consistencies that they have and how the Hebrew Bible turns them for its own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of flips a lot of the themes and the protagonist antagonist positions on its head. So if we're looking at the Mesopotamian narrative, the gods are kind of the bad guys. They create humanity. Humanity is too noisy. So there's a series of several ways that the god Enlil tries to like decrease our numbers so we're not so noisy, we don't cause so many problems. And his brother, the god Enki, keeps kind of foiling him. So his final response is to send this flood to try and wipe out humanity so he can get some peace and quiet. Which is not like the act of a benevolent deity who is fond of his creation. Right. And Enki like tells the protagonist, build a boat, take these animals, take your family. This is how you're going to survive this. Whereas if you look at the account in the Hebrew Bible, it's turned on its head. Yahweh is presented as having no other choice but to send the flood because of humanity's wickedness. So it's flipping that narrative, and it's very interesting the way that that's done. And that's why I say it's intertextuality. It's more interesting than a straight up theft. Mm-hmm. The Israelites are not just taking this story and saying, oh, this is ours, not your God, but my God. They're taking it and they're changing it so that it actually says something different. It doesn't say God's are vengeful and unreliable and will kill you if you are too noisy. It says we as humans are wicked and our God is just and had no other choice, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, like I pulled up the Hebrew here of Genesis 6:5, and like the emphasis, Enlil and Anu, the two gods that are sort of responsible for sending the flood, they're said to have acted irrationally, right? And Enki is the one that through trickery, right, through stretching the truth, perhaps, is able to save humanity. And in the end, he's like, he and I think it's Bela are like, how could Enlil have done this, right? So the deity, as Megan pointed out, is the bad guy in this. Whereas here in Genesis 6, and Yahweh saw that the wickedness of humanity was really, really like rabbah. It was great in the earth, and every imagination or intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the day.
Right.
So I mean, it's like
God gets off the hook in this one in a way. God's not even being put on the hook. They're making sure that you're reading this and cannot blame God at all in this.
And if you go to 8:21, which is at the end, Noah has disembarked. Yahweh smells the aroma of the sacrifice, and he says, I will never again curse humanity, even or because of curse the ground because of humanity. Sorry, I'm trying to read this on the fly here. Although, or even though the intents of the heart of humanity are wicked,
right,
from like his youth. So even here at the end, sort of like an inclusia, like, hey, I sent this thing.
I was perfectly justified in doing so.
Yeah. But now I'm going to be gracious. And even though they're still going to be wicked from birth, I'm not going to do this again. This is I think, clear polemicizing. And of course, we're not like,
I was going to say, like, it not only works as a polemicizing thing, but if I'm like fast forwarding and imagine this is a Judean scribe in the South, like, I can see this being a post-Babylonian destruction explanation for why Yahweh left them, forsook them. And so we need to rationalize, it's not that Yahweh wasn't strong enough. It wasn't that he wasn't powerful, then he wasn't God. He left because we sinned. We were the ones who were evil. And so I could see that theology that they have rationalized why Babylon did what they did to the temple and stuff.
I mean,
it would work in this.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of like the play of the Deuteronomistic historian, right? When he's writing and like you see, it's really hard to read the book of Deuteronomy and then read the rest of the Deuteronomistic history, Joshua through Kings, and not say, wait a second, like you have all these curses in Deuteronomy 28 saying, if you do all this bad stuff, I'm going to curse you, ultimately ejecting you from the land. And lo and behold, that's exactly how the story plays out, right? So it is like that's certainly why this idea exists, that they're looking back at history, what's happened to them, and trying to explain. This is not new. This is not novel to like Judean scribes, right? Like when Marduk gets taken in the 12th century, the statue of Marduk gets taken out to Elam. Like this, Marduk is pissed. That's why he left, right? It wasn't because Marduk was weak.
It wasn't because the foreign army was so strong they were able to overpower the city god. No, he wanted to be taken because the people of his city had screwed up.
Yeah,
it was punishment for them, not some kind of victory for the Elamites.
That's right.
I giggle, even though I bet if I was there, I wouldn't be giggling.
No.
Oh, wow. So I love this stuff. Journeying and seeing how the myths transformed purposefully for their own cultural context, for their own situation. And, this is an interesting point too, is how they're borrowing from Mesopotamia, where they're probably just in the region already in a way, or somewhere in the vicinity. This has got to be impactful. It kind of makes me, this is outside of the Assyriologist point of view, but the whole Deucalion flood in Greece, like I've read several scholars who are like, there was no flood in Greece. They borrowed that from the Semitic East, going back into like Mesopotamia and clearly getting it from the East and bringing it and importing it and creating their Deucalion myth. In fact, even in earlier Greek sources like Homer and Hesiod, it's not there. There's no Deucalion flood. It happens later. So it's really interesting to see how these different cultures are going to these ancient floods. And if there was a historical kernel, it would be the Euphrates rising?
Well, yeah, I mean, flooding is, it's a reality of human existence apart from anything else. But the major early civilizations were all built on rivers. They had to be. You need fresh water. You think about Egypt, the whole country is built along the Nile historically. And the same is true of Mesopotamia. If you look at a map showing the historical courses of the rivers and the historical location of the Persian Gulf, all of the major cities are river cities. So a couple of them are even built over rivers. You've got like Sippar has like a city on one side and a city on another, and the river flows right through it. So flooding was a thing.
And I think Mari, I'm digging back into my archaeology classes with Glenn Schwartz, but I think it's Mari, half the city at one point was wiped out by the flood, and as Margaron draws boy, I'm digging deep for that one.
I was gonna say that's
impressive. But and if you think about you got the Tigris, the Euphrates, but then you have these sort of channels, right? And you get canals that are dug off of those, and it just it doesn't take it's not a surprising event for floodwaters to come down from the mountains and overflow the canals or the river itself.
So worldwide flood happened. Okay, got it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying.
And there is solid archaeological evidence to back that up.
Yes. Erica,
let me ask you a more direct question, because both of you have been digging into this. Megan, you're the real brains behind the writings here. Josh,
kind to say.
No, you really are. Josh came and stayed with us for almost 2 weeks. It seemed like a good minute. And we talked about this in person. We hung out. We had lots of conversations. And I guess for both of you, with all the research you've done as a Syriologist, if I were to ask you on the spot, no, I defer, this isn't my expertise, even if it's your opinion, I would like to get your thoughts, because some scholars have more direct, blunt, they think, here's the antecedent text, or here is what we think they're literally looking at in some way, shape, or form, and they're using into the Bible. and maybe we start from there and then get back into the Sumerian myth. And then I want to talk about your book, because I think how we can learn Sumerian and then read the actual Sumerian floods or other texts in the oldest known language in the world sounds fascinating. So if I said, Genesis, tell me, whoever the scribe, I'm putting S there because who knows what, who.
Oh, no, you need an S.
Right? What sources are they looking at? Gilgamesh Tablet 11? Is there anything? Do you think they know these directly, or help me out?
I doubt they're like sitting down and writing with a Gilgamesh tablet next to them. My intuition would be that they are familiar with the story.
I mean, it's used in scribal education, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So,
actually,
like, we've got a fragment from Jericho, I think. Am I remembering that correctly? Or Megiddo? It might be from Megiddo. Anyway, yeah. So, I mean, like, Gilgamesh is used in scribal education, and so, yeah, the fact that they would be familiar with that sort of thing is unsurprising. And again, looking at the narrow linguistic parallels, it's not just coincidental that they know of a story about some flood, right? I mean, there is dependence, let's call it that, at a minimum, dependence of the story in the Hebrew Bible upon the Akkadian version. And the way that you often see interplay between, so like the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, is like it's bringing together the individual Sumerian stories about Gilgamesh. So like you have an independent story about Gilgamesh and Huwawa out in the cedar forest.
You have one about Enkidu dying.
That's right.
Albeit in a different manner, but there's the death of Enkidu.
Yeah. You have Gilgamesh and the Bull of Heaven, where, Inanna goes up to heaven because she's really pissed at Gilgamesh because she, pronounces her love for him and wants to marry him. And he says, no, thanks.
Thank you.
I value my life. And so she goes up to heaven and gets the Bull of Heaven, and, they have to defeat it. Well, these individual stories that are in Sumerian get brought down and connected into a larger epic. And even there, right, this is important, even there, the scribe that's putting the Epic of Gilgamesh together is doing something with those stories. It's not just this slavish, grab this, throw it here.
He's not just like copying and pasting it into a Word document and like typing out a sentence or two to transition between the different stories. Mm-hmm. He's taking them, he's reworking them entirely, taking bits of one, the whole story of another, and crafting this single narrative and framing it with an introduction and a conclusion that is completely original.
Yeah.
And kind of forms the whole thing into a commentary on like the nature of mortality, which was not really present in the original stories. I mean, you get it a little bit in the death of Enkidu, but it's not present in the original stories. So he's taking these themes, these stories, these characters that are already in existence, that he's obviously very familiar with, that the audience would be familiar with, but he's making something new for a specific purpose out of them.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Josh,
I completely took over
I feel like you were wanting to say so. I felt it, and I didn't want to interrupt you.
In your sub-spirit.
I can pick up the pheromones of speech from you. And I know you wanted to say something. I was going to say something too, but I was like,
no, go ahead, because I've forgotten what it was. So that's
let me just ask, throw in the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks with this. And that is, a lot of times people are writing with political agenda, religious, political, and especially in Mesopotamia, very king, like a kingship kind of material. Is this story about Gilgamesh kind of like how we see Marduk becomes the chief god later? Is Gilgamesh playing some historical role in reality that they're crafting this narrative about him and making him a key player in it?
Go ahead.
No, I'm thinking about kingship.
Yeah, she's been actually working with kingship recently.
Oh wow.
I'll say what
you go for it. Yeah.
So I suspect the reason that Gilgamesh is being used here outside of the stories that were about him, I think that the point of what we see in the epic, at least, is that Gilgamesh is this sort of impetuous, running roughshod, favorite of the gods, the strongest in the world, but only by a little with Enkidu. But he's crafted right in the beginning, being this dick, right? I mean, he's
the antithesis of what a king should be.
Exactly. And this is something, by the way, that fundamentalist evangelicals should probably pay close attention to. You hear every day, oh, those, other countries, the Canaanites and the Assyrians, if they, anyway, and they're just wicked people. Well, not exactly. If you read through royal inscriptions, as Megan is pointing out, or you read through just the textual data that we have, or even the iconographic stuff that we have, the narrative is kingship is tied together, as you were talking about earlier, and I'll let you talk about heroism, but like it's shepherding. It's care, not only for the gods and making sure they get fed and are taken care of, but for the people, right? And bringing justice and strength and protection to the vulnerable, the widow and the orphan, and doing so by fighting the chaos of the rebel lands that is out there. Right now, is that propagandistic?
Absolutely.
Yes, but so is the Bible.
Bite your tongue.
Bite it. So yeah, I think those are important things to recognize. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't really have anything pertinent. Derek was talking about Gilgamesh and kingship, and I gave a presentation on Tuesday to a high school class about kingship and Gilgamesh. So my brain was like, oh yes, kingship and heroes, and this is very interesting. But it's not actually relevant to what we're talking about.
Well, I do want to point this out. Like, we've talked a little bit about how the Hebrew Bible interplays with the early Mesopotamian flood traditions, but there are other ways that this happens, not just in the flood. And these are things that, again, if you can go back and read, ideally, go back and read the stories in their original texts, these things sort of pop out at you. And I took a couple notes today as I was going back through some things. But in Atrahasis, the Akkadian story, Megan was talking about how Enlil, there's so much noise because the people have been created to do hard labor for the gods, so the Igigi gods don't have to do it. So like the people are innocent, right? They're just doing what they were created to do, and they're making noise because they're multiplying. And Enlil's frustrated, and so he decides to try to call the population, call the herd. There's one god that continues slyly, right, to come to the rescue of humanity. And he does this by going to Atrahasis, this man of great wisdom, and revealing to him, hey, there's a plague that Enlil is sending. Here's what you do.
Here's who you pray to get
That's
the
right.
plague to go away.
This is the right God to make offerings to, and then that God will take care of this. And so Enki is coming using this crafty skill that he has to be able to rescue humanity through Atrahasis. Then the second, that the plague doesn't work, and so he sends, he's going to do a famine, right? And same thing, Enki comes, tells him who to pray to, and then sends a spate of
Does it rain fish or something?
Yeah, to sustain humanity. So again,
not at all like manna from heaven.
No, or
course.
the fish.
No. Or indeed, yes, the fish. Yeah.
And notice well, anyway, yeah, the quail that are sent to punish it anyway.
Interesting.
Another reversal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'd have to.
Yeah, that would take some arguing, but
yeah,
it's just interesting.
Yeah,
Yes,
because I mean, Moses says all the fish of the sea. Would this be able to feed this population? Anyway, but what's interesting about this is that the first two, the plague and then the famine, Enki comes, or Ea comes through this crafty, duplicitous stuff, right? That's going behind the back of the gods. That's sending it.
Is this the time he's talking at the wall?
Yeah, almost. That's
okay.
that's the flood.
Okay, got it.
But the first two times he says, "Look, here's Atrahasis. Here's how you save humanity." That's what makes the third one interesting, because when Enlil determines, hey, we're sending a flood to kill them all, Ea does the same thing that he's done. He's made to swear an oath that he's not going to go tell humanity. So that's what he does, is he goes and speaks to the reed fence and says, build this boat.
So for those who aren't familiar with the story, Atrahasis is behind the reed fence, and Ea says, oh, I'm not going to go and tell a person. So he just goes and randomly talks to this fence, which of course is hiding Atrahasis. So
right.
it's a way around the oath that still gets the information where it needs to be. Yes.
But what makes this part interesting is that the story talks about the flood hero saying to Ea, hey, what do I tell these people? Because if you think about how the biblical text is set up, who builds the boat? Noah, right? Here in Atrahasis, in the Mesopotamian tradition,
it's a community effort.
He's getting the carpenters. He's getting people that can do the pitch, the bitumen on the outside.
He pays them as well, doesn't he?
I know he throws a feast, at least. I don't remember if he pays them. But it's a community that's coming together all to build this boat. And so Atrahasis is like, what do I tell these people? Because I know
get on the boat with me.
I know I'm not saving humanity. I'm just saving me and my family. And Enki says, lie to them. And so he lies to them. And it's interesting at the end, what he says at the end of the story, but he lies to him and says, hey, tell them that Enlil's really pissed at you and that you can't stay in this realm, because Enlil gets the middle realm and Ea gets the subterranean waters realm. So what we're going to do is, as my servant, I'm going to bring you down to the Apsu, and you're going to live with me. So you have to have a boat built. So like they won't know what's coming. And he even throws them this feast at the end. And it talks about how he's retching gall because he can't eat. He's pacing back and forth because he's like, is there guilt? And the note that I put here is twice now, Enki Ea has helped Atrahasis save the people. Now Atrahasis apparently knows what is coming and can't tell the people. And then I kind of, went in my head here. I wonder if the idea is that the reader is supposed to feel that the people are completely innocent and trusting Atrahasis, who has to keep the truth from them. And of course, this is the opposite of what we see in the Hebrew Bible, right? The people aren't helping. The people are so wicked. It's Noah's got to do it. Noah and his sons. And it's that you don't feel, when you read the biblical text, you don't feel sorry for the people. Even if you watch like a Superbook, if you remember, you guys remember Superbook, the cartoon, the flood one, like, oh, they're out there and they're making fun of Noah and who builds a boat. We haven't even seen anything like this, So it's completely different. And in fact, and this is the other thing, the other note that I made at the end of the story, of course, Enlil finds out. I'll be quiet after this. I'm so sorry. But Enlil finds out what's happened. And he's like, what the hell? Like, how did these people survive? And they're like, well, who do you think told them? Right?
It's a mystery.
So, excuse me. To defend himself, I'm so sorry. Ea says, I did this to protect you, the gods. And so what I wrote here, it's interesting that Enki is being deceptive in order to benefit man, right? Because he's keeping humanity alive. And as we're going to find out later with the Gilgamesh Tablet 11, it's to keep those secrets, the knowledge, the secret lore, whatever. But also to benefit the gods. Here is another example of lying from a god that is seen as a good thing. And Derek, where else do we see lying in Genesis 1 through 11 as a good thing?
I mean, it could never be the Garden of Eden.
No, it couldn't be.
We'd have to find it somewhere else.
This is why I think understanding this Mesopotamian background, it puts you in a really good position to not have to buck against, whoa, Yahweh can't be lying here when he says that when they eat of the fruit, they'll die that day immediately. That can't be, it has to be like spiritual death or something, right? Or they're eventually going to die. That's what it means. No, Yahweh can be deceptive, and it's not a bad thing. That's
in
the
the
point.
ancient Near Eastern context, this makes so much sense. And that's why I love like learning from you and learning from the scholars who are going back and not having what I call theological blinders or anachronisms in their ideas. This is so much fun. One thing I want to ask you about, just thinking of Enki for a second here, it's really interesting to try and enter the mind of maybe how whoever the people are that are reading the Atrahasis epic. But in a way, it seems like morally, he's also saving the gods by not completely eradicating humanity. How would they have been seen on a moral ground? I just wonder if they had any moral culpability due to the complete eradication of humans. And thanks to Enki, their wrath was kind of appeased. And here we are with a barbecue after the flood going, okay, again, it's the same. You know what? I'm not going to do that again. I shouldn't do that again.
That's what's interesting. And then you should talk.
I get them all riled up.
Yahweh is not dependent upon, in the story, that the reader doesn't walk away thinking Yahweh's dependent upon sacrifices, right? That is the complete opposite of what you see in the Mesopotamian flood tradition, because the gods, it's like they shoot themselves in the foot. Enlil and Anu shoot themselves in the foot. This is why, like, Aruru and the mother goddess, she's like, why did we do this? Mm-hmm. Right? Because what is it that the Mesopotamian thought process was concerning the care and feeding of the gods? It's that humans are made to serve the gods, to feed them. And so if you kill them all, that's right, they get thirsty and they get hungry. So then when it talks about Utanapishtim or Atrahasis or Ziusudra coming out and sacrificing, and the gods swarm around it like flies, it's this ravenous, like, oh my God, we're so hungry. And that's not Yahweh, right? That's not Yahweh. Yahweh smells it, and
it's enjoyable, but it's not like...
He does change his mind or his heart. Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to notice. But sorry, go ahead.
If I had something to say, I would.
Oh, okay. You just...
Bam.
Yeah. No,
so I guess I think you're in the same boat as me in saying, like, what Josh is saying makes sense. In light of this,
absolutely.
God is... While God favors these corporeal realities and experiences that we see that are still remnants, I'll call them fossils, but they weren't fossils in the mind of the viewer or the reader at this time. They really did believe God still ate these sacrifices.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think if you get right back to it, there's not a massive amount of difference between the practicalities of worship for state religion. I'm going to be very specific there because we don't know an awful lot about domestic religion. We don't know how ordinary people worshipped, because ordinary people in Mesopotamia and Israelites did not have access to, like, direct access to the cult statue, to the god. They had to go through temples and priests and kings. So in Mesopotamia, at least, you get festivals where the statues of the gods are brought out of the temple and they go on maybe a little boat trip down the river, see their spouse, go back up the river, and back into their temple again. Those would really be the only times that your average person had access, like direct access to their god. So how religion worked domestically is something people are still working on. and I've completely lost. No, I haven't. Okay, and this is the same in Israelite religion, and I'm not an expert in Israelite history, but the practicalities are the same. People don't have access to the gods. You sacrifice, you do live animal sacrifices, you burn the meat, and the odor, the aroma is what the gods kind of subsist on, Yahweh included. But it's very definitely framed in Mesopotamian mythology as being more of a codependent relationship, I think, than you see in the Hebrew Bible. Yahweh is depicted more as, like, we're more like pets. Humans are more like pets for Yahweh, or children, and he expects a certain level of behavior, and we don't live up to those expectations, so there are consequences. With Mesopotamia, there's a lot more of a give and take. It's much more of a,
it's
I
not
am going
one-sided only. Like,
yeah, exactly. The gods benefit from humanity's existence. People, obviously, the sacrifices are hugely important. It's what keeps them not necessarily alive, but like strong and vital and healthy. And people tend to their temples, which were considered the god's household. So you need humanity for all of that, like, physical activity, because the god's not going to just get up, walk around and like herd sheep, right? That's what we're here for. So there's a very definite split in how the relationships are conceived of.
Just something to note on that, and then Josh, whatever you got, brother, I could smell the thinking there. Is the idea of the give and take that we see here? You can tell the author of the Bible is aware of that give and take with the quit trying to seek that divine, quit trying to be like the gods, which all these earlier predecessors were. Humans are striving and hand in hand with the deities, civilization, kingship. All of this stuff seems to be like, don't stop. And Enoch, right? We have Enochian traditions, which really hint at this ascending to the deities and being that close. So I see what you're saying, and it makes me think. It also tells us how human those gods are on a different level. They're much more like us, even if they are bigger, than somewhat we see certain attributes of Yahweh. But it's like they're really clearly just so obviously from what I'm hearing, it sounds like.
Yeah, and there's certainly not univocality in the Hebrew Bible about this, right? So when you read Genesis 1 and you read the creation story, you get a much more transcendent, majestic, out there. The sea is his plaything, right? Whereas in Genesis 2, some trial and error. Hey, we've got this guy that I made. Bring the animals up. See if there's somebody's, one of these suited for him. No? All right. Well, I'll make one, right? So
did he try to see if it works? Anyway, that's different.
I hope not. But this is something that I think is actually very important to juxtapose with the conceptions in Mesopotamian thought, as you were talking about, of the gods, because one of the things that I wrote my dissertation on were these songs that certain priests would sing or recite to particular deities, quite often Enlil, in order to appease them, right? To calm their heart is the language that's used. And the idea was, and I think I've talked about this actually on the program, but just in case people forgot it, temples were made out of mud brick, and the mud brick only lasts about 50 years before you have to do a significant, rebuild. And anytime you fuck with a god's house, like it leaves open the possibility he's going to get pissed and leave. Right.
Like, think about having builders in and having something renovated. Do you want to stay there?
No.
And if you think about, what they envisioned when we were talking about Marduk, for example, when Marduk left, it was coincidentally the same time that they were conquered, right? And so the God is there. If you go back, I talk about this, I think, in volume 1 of the Atheist Handbook, but you go back to this thing called the Lagash border conflict in the third millennium. It's two cities that are fighting with each other.
Right.
But the way that it's framed is the god of one city, Ningirsu, is fighting the god of the other city, Shara, of the city of Uma. And whoever wins, it's actually depicted in the iconography and the Stele of the Vultures. Like whoever wins, it's the city wins.
Plays out in the mortal realm at the same time. That's
right. And it's, it's very much on par with some of the things that we see, like in the book of Daniel, later in the book of Daniel, right? You have like divine beings who are over, certain nations. Anyway, the point is that, or where I was going with this is that that the God is there to protect the city and to keep things going and keep things in order. And so if you go messing with his temple, or if you take the statue of the God out on a parade during like the New Year's festival or something, these are these liminal, they call them liminal spaces or liminal events where it's like the in-between, and the God could decide, I'm out, right? I'm not putting up with this. And so what you do is the priest is there to recite these prayers to him, these songs, him or her. And what they do is they talk about all of the bad shit that will happen if the God leaves. So, Enlil, the city fell into total disrepair and long grass grew at the wall and the invaders came in and destroyed us.
Mothers mourned their children and young women mourned their husbands, and
the butter churn was overturned, empty, something that we can all identify with. But the point is that the gods are seen as capricious. That's the point. And this is an idea that would have been very, very clear in the first millennium. Think about the story of Era and Isham. Era's this, I can't think of it. He's a bloodthirsty god, right? And Marduk, leaves his throne for a little while to touch up his statue. And Era just goes crazy on the people and just killing people. So this was the depiction of the deity. And so you got to keep them calm, got to make sure everything's just right for them. That's not Yahweh, right? Everything that Yahweh does in on the whole is very much above board, right? He's the good guy. And he's the one that wants to protect. He wants to be there for the people, but sinful humanity, wicked humanity, they do it to themselves.
I have to ask you, Megan, this is something that the way you described it earlier, and then Josh, you said a few things that also went in line with this. They would get the god or goddesses. They would parade them or even have them make a visit to their wife. Now, this is going to sound funny. I don't mean this in any funny, bad way, but kids today, whether it's a little boy playing with G.I. Joes or a girl with dolls or whatever it may be, they're playing with these toys, but they're really living in that world as kids in this kind of fictive state of these dolls really love them back. And they have these kind of connections. As humans, I think we inherently have this towards inanimate objects that we assume might be animate, or as some scientists will say, there's like agency. We assume agency in things that may not have them. It sounds to me, the way it was described, and I'm sure it's way more complex, adults playing with dolls in a way. It's like these big idols, and they're far more serious, of course, than just playing a game, but they really believe these things. I'm just saying it sounds like they're in that world that these
absolutely
gods.
yeah, absolutely. And there are striking parallels between children playing with dolls and what we're talking about here with Mesopotamian state religion. But the gods would be like have personal attendants who would dress them, who would like wash them, clean them, put their robes on, get their breakfast out for them, then clear away afterwards. You've got all of that going on a daily basis, as well as the cult festivals where gods are taken out in like litters, like carried up on people's shoulders and paraded through the cities. But you also have, and I wrote my first master's thesis on this, it was a while ago, so bear with me, but you have hymns and communications to and from the gods. So you have kings especially writing about their relationships with the gods and about how the gods view them. And you have prophetic readings, or specifically in the Neo-Assyrian period, you have people giving oracles, saying the god is angry because of X. And this all works together to kind of give a connection, or at least the impression of a connection, between the mortals, again, specifically the king, because that's really the evidence we have here is about the king, but right, between the king and between the gods. And kings are described as the beloved of the gods. You get descriptions again in the Neo-Assyrian period, which is like the first millennium BCE. You get descriptions of the goddess, usually Ishtar, being like a mother to the god. She suckled the gods, no, not the god, being a mother to the king. She suckled the king. She put him on his throne. She is responsible for all of the great things he's done. She loves him. And this is throughout Mesopotamian history, right? Gods, kings are beloved of X, Y, and Z god. And I think there is, regardless of how cynical you are as to how much of this is propaganda, because yes, it absolutely, a lot of it is propaganda, but I think it would be a little of an overreach to say that the kings did not believe in the gods and they did not believe that they were favored by the gods, because if they weren't favored by the gods, they wouldn't be king. It's just how it works, right? The fact that they're publicizing it obviously is to do with propaganda and to do with convincing everyone else that they should remain king. But there is definitely this relationship that is built and maintained by the people, and by individuals and the elite especially.
I think I committed a sin here and took us off track. So I hope Yahweh doesn't.
One of us was going to do it.
Every intent of the thought of Derek's heart is only evil continually.
Atrahasis, talking to the wall. We went into this. We started showing some interesting things about how the gods have an interdependent relationship on humans. They need them for food. They need them to dig the canals, or the Agigi gods are going to strike again. Like, we don't want that. We need them. Okay. There's other myths, and I feel like we're going backwards to try and get to Sumerian and like the most prototype model of this. But I don't want to put words in your mouth or even the idea there if that's not the path you're trying to take. So I'm following your lead.
Yeah, I mean, I think what people probably should recognize about Sumerian is that it's, it's the earliest language that we have. And while you do have a section in the second half of the third millennium BCE, where like the Sargonic Empire comes into power, and Akkadian is, a very important, obviously, language there. Sumerian is Sumerian is a living language. And there's a little bit of debate about when that runs out. Is it during the Ur-3 period at the end of the third millennium, or does it go into the Old Babylonian period? But if we assume that Sumerian dies as like a living language, dies out and becomes a dead language, right around 2000 BCE, it's not that Sumerian goes out of style. It's just it gets restricted to a scribal context, right, or professional context. And so Sumerian literature blows up. I mean, blows up right around 1800 BCE. So if we have the city of Nippur down in southern Mesopotamia, and we have other cities as well, Sippar and but even Uruk. But like we have this huge cache of tablets found in scribal education context. And like the literature, everybody knew Akkadian, right? If you knew how to write, if you knew how to read, you did that in Akkadian, right? Everybody. But the good scribes, what kind of a scribe doesn't know Sumerian, right? That was and that comes up in the text themselves. What scribe doesn't know Sumerian? Only good scribes know Sumerian. And so the literature that explodes in the first quarter of the second millennium BCE, that tradition, like it is the one that we obviously study today. That's where the main source of literature comes from. But so much of the mythology grows from there, and of course you get Akkadian parallels to these things. But it really is in Sumerian where these stories begin, and I think part of the reason that that's interesting for people, for example, that study the Bible, is that there's a book by Samuel Noah Kramer that was written back in like the 50s, I think, but it's History Begins at Sumer, and it's so true, right? I opened my my Fulbright application with the line "History begins at Sumer," and then the whole thing was about like you can trace back the effects on modern Western civilization right on back through to Sumerian, the Sumerian, ancient Sumer. Because if you think about just the tradition, the New Testament, of course, is pulling from the Old, right, and reliant upon the Old. The Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is heavily dependent upon its Mesopotamian precursors and predecessors and things that were going in contemporary circles. And those circles in the first millennium are scribal education pulls from these earlier Akkadian and Sumerian texts. And even the other part of my dissertation was writing on these liturgical texts I was just talking about. Well, that tradition becomes canonized down into the first millennium, and these are the things. This is the culture and the impact of Mesopotamian literature and language upon the rest of the ancient Near East and of course on the Hebrew Bible is very, very important. You can just run that right on back to ancient Sumer. So obviously we think it's an important language and tradition to understand.
I'd like Megan, tell me what you think. I mean, obviously
set me straight, girl.
I'm just saying, is there anything that you'd want to add to that? Because that's a lot. It's very important we get back there and understand what's going on. I'm falling in love with these stories more. I mean, I had like when I first started MythVision, it was all like just anti-apologetics. Don't get me wrong. I still do that. I still want to poke holes and show how silly some of the literalism is. But I'm actually enjoying learning about these cultures, the humans behind them, the stories they told. It makes me connect to humanity at large and why we did these things on a different level. So maybe your 2 cents.
I think I absolutely agree with what Josh says. I think it's really important for understanding where a lot of very common beliefs in modern Western civilization come from, because they come from somewhere, and a lot of the time that somewhere is Sumerian mythology. But I also think that, or at least for me, one of the wonderful things about being able to read dead languages, specifically Sumerian, you get this wonderful window into people. And a lot of what we have, yes, is elite literature and propaganda, but we also have personal letters and tax records, and that might not seem very exciting, but you can use that to reconstruct a whole world that has been dead and gone for 4,000 years, which I find really exciting. And I love being able to look at, so my specialization before I left my PhD program was royal inscriptions. That's why I keep talking about propaganda. It's what I do. I loved being able to look at something that was buried underneath a temple 4,000 years ago and read what it said and have that give me an insight into the mindset of the people who buried it. Like, what was this thing doing? Why was it buried? Being able to read that inscription doesn't give you the whole answer, but it helps you start your journey into that question. And I love it. I love being able to read things that people wrote so long ago and to get a feel for what was important to them and how their world worked, because I think language gives you a really unique insight into what is important in a culture and in a society. And I love being able to do it, and I love sharing it with people. And honestly, we the Learn to Read Ancient Sumerian video series on the Digital Hammurabi channel is far and away the most popular video series we've ever done. Playlist? And yeah, I think playlists. It'll be down the bottom somewhere.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yep, Learn Ancient Sumerian. Yeah.
Let me show that.
And we were both incredibly shocked at how popular it was and continues to be. And I think it really speaks to the fact that people are just interested in ancient history, interested in the past, and being able to give people access to this information that is frankly really difficult to get hold of. If you don't go through grad school, really, this was the first, like, we did this, 2019?
Yeah, I think so.
That was the first general introduction to Sumerian literature. Ha! Snap.
Somebody got it. You know what I'm saying?
The rest of them are written by academics for academics, and they are reference grammars, and they're written with the understanding that you already know Sumerian and you need to look up a specific point of grammatical inquiry, which is great for people who already know Sumerian. For people who don't already know Sumerian, it's really unhelpful and quite dense and difficult to get through. So we just being able to share this information with people just makes me really, really happy. And the fact that people actually want it it's a wonderful thing. I'd love it.
And if I could piggyback on that, so this sort of is a really good segue into, oddly enough, book 3, the last in the series that I just wrote the introduction for. So the way that this series works is the first book gives you
about Atheist Handbook?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, got it. Okay.
The first book gives you basic grammar, right? But basic grammar enough that you can read that by the end.
This one I think is in the British Museum.
Yeah.
So by the end of the book, you should be able to go to the British Museum and read that.
Yeah, just look through the glass.
I have to say, as a geeky, nerdy type person, being able to go into a museum and read something is really, really cool.
It's a really cool feeling.
Be obnoxiously out loud. And he went
absolutely.
down the street.
Absolutely. I was like, Mom, do you know what this says? Let me read it for you.
But
very obnoxious.
So then the second book, the one that just came out, builds on the grammar. You know, so, the example that I think I give is when I talked about this the last time was like, if you're trying to teach a kid or somebody that's learning English, you might say, all right, we're going to be introduced to plurals today. You know, so if you want to make a word a plural, you put an S on the end. You don't then say, now there are examples where you could put en on the end, you know, ox and oxen, or goose could go to geese. You don't like talk about the irregular plurals. You let them have the you know, the S makes it a plural for a while, get them comfortable with that. Part of the problem with learning ancient languages is that people that write the books out of necessity are trying to give you everything about each, you know, topic or each grammatical feature at once. And it becomes really overwhelming to learn all the different little parts. So what we did is the first book is just basically teach you S makes it a plural, right? Don't worry about the other variations. Thank you. Then book 2 gives you the variations in a systematic way. Book 3 is going to be this really cool hybrid. I know I say that it's cool because I think it is cool. But Megan was talking about the different types of text that we have, right? So we have the literature, we have the liturgies, we have royal inscriptions, but we have receipts, you have letters, you have omens, right?
Right.
You know, you have incantations, you have legal contracts, you have law collections, like there's all kinds of stuff that you have. And what we're going to do is chronologically go through from starting in the earlier periods of Sumerian, go through and explain all the different types of text, or the main types of text that you find.
Give examples.
Give examples, give translations, you know, and so that you can walk away going, oh my gosh, I could read 1,000 different receipts and like of one different city and like come up with an economic, you know, understanding of their economy based on that. Or I can really focus in on legal texts and understand, you know, how the system worked there, the legal system works. Or I can read literature, or I can whatever. But that's, by the time you get to the end, I mean, I'm convinced of this, and we've had people using the books already. They work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they work. So it's exciting.
Reminded me of Carl Sagan, and when he was commissioning a golden plate with 50 different languages and going to send them off in outer space, hoping extraterrestrial life will come across this language and just somehow figure out one of these languages, and then they can know about us and understand our message to them. But I think if linguists would have talked to Carl Sagan, they might have halted him and said, actually, language is connected to culture, and if you don't have that connection, you're never going to solve this riddle of understanding the culture and the people through the language. We have that connection, unlike some extraterrestrials, if they ever came across it. And I thought it was interesting to just think about how there's a golden plate floating out there, probably, that has no use to anything that discovers that, other than to say, what is this? Something's up with this. This is not natural.
Well, I mean, I feel like I do need to correct you, because I know Megan's thinking it, right? And this is important. The aliens know about us.
Jesus Christ.
Right? I mean, this is like Zechariah Sitchin. Haven't you heard of Zechariah Sitchin? Right? I mean, like ancient aliens. Like,
I'm sorry, we are talking about Sumerian and stuff like that. My bad. I should have known better. You know. Anyway, I'm being funny, but look, I want to ask you this though: Sumerian flood. We talked about Atrahasis. We talked about Gilgamesh. We flirted with some of these other myths that come a little bit later. Maybe I'm jumping the gun and going all the way back to Sumer, but your books will help people to be able to actually go to these tablets eventually and be able to read and solve some of the stuff going on and the oldest known stories and stuff. Tell us about the Sumerian flood, or are there something before Atrahasis we need to tackle before we get back to Sumer? What do you think?
I'm just pulling up the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature website, and I'm sorry for the name. It's apparently the best we can come up with.
Sumeriologists are very good at naming things, Josh. Yes. How dare you?
How
very dare you?
So if you look obviously in the background of our of the window here, that's the tablet that is the Sumerian flood story. But Megan's sharing the screen now.
Are you sharing it?
I'm just requesting. Yeah.
Make sure your social security numbers are on that. Okay, cool.
So this is another reason why it's really. I'm going to just back up for just a second so that you guys can see this. Oops.
Okay, I can't zoom out. Never mind.
I think you did it. Damn.
Okay, what are we looking for?
I just wanted to. I can just do it. It's all right.
Because the mouse, our mouse has turned itself off.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
I
don't know what's going on.
No, I think the
window is just.
Zachariah Sitchin has come in.
Hey, Sitchin, can you come read the Sumerian for us?
We're just gonna.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on here.
By the way, there's so many compliments in chat. In case you both were, interested in hearing, lots of positivity.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. This is
deeply unprofessional.
No, it's totally fine.
There we go. Okay. Totally now we got it. Okay.
And thank you. I have actually been tracking the chat. Everyone's been
cool.
For the majority of people, it's absolutely lovely. You have a wonderful audience.
Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
Does not surprise me in the slightest. And yes, I am that lady from Bart Ehrman's podcast.
Yes.
A couple of people have caught that. Well done.
So this
and I'm married to this guy. We have children. So
man.
So this is the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature. One of the results, if you do this, the first two books in particular, you'll be able to read the stuff that's on here. Maybe not perfectly, right? And we can't read it perfectly, but pretty well. So I'll just show you how much is here really quickly.
And this is Sumerian.
This is all
This is Sumerian. And each of these sections have multiple texts associated with them. This is just how they've been organized. These are not just individual texts.
So
yeah, there's a lot.
So here, if you want stories about Enki, here are the literary texts that are about Enki.
Oh my gosh.
If you want them about Gilgamesh, here are the Gilgamesh stories. So we were talking about Gilgamesh and Huwawa, Gilgamesh Enkidu in the Netherworld, Gilgamesh and the Bowl of Heaven.
Where's that?
If you just click on that, this is what Sumerian looks like.
After it's been taken out of cuneiform.
Right.
Right.
And so you'll be able to read this.
Rated or something to the effect.
So then if you look at, it's under other deities for some reason. I don't know why. Here's the flood story. There it is in transliteration. You can see that it's pretty fragmentary. Obviously, if you think back to the way that tablet looked on our screen, it's broken. That's pretty common. But you can see it in translation. So they give you the English, right?
Oh, that's amazing.
And if people are interested in finding this for themselves, you can Google ETCSL Sumerian, and it'll come up.
Yep.
I think it's the first entry that comes up. And if you take it, can you take us back to the homepage for a minute? It'll come up with this thing. So if you look on the right of the screen, you can have corpus content by category or corpus content by number. Either will give you a list of things that you can then click through and read yourself.
But if you look,
CSL homepage or
ETCSL Sumerian. Yeah.
Okay, I think I found it. I'm gonna paste that in the chat unless one of the mods does it before me. I think I'm there. You can actually probably see. Let's see if this is it. Make sure this is right. Oh, I'm a dummy. I stopped sharing my screen. Here we go. Is this it? This is the homepage? No.
No, but if you click, if that was the right,
that
top one.
Okay,
yep.
Homepage. That's what I thought.
Yep,
okay,
there you go.
Got it. Okay, it just confused me a little bit. Okay, back to your page though. Sorry.
So if you look, this is what makes this stuff so exciting. Again, it's fragmentary everywhere. These little dots are like this. It means that the line is broken or the tab is broken. But here it is. Excuse me. So here the gods are making the other gods take an oath, right? Here's Ziud Sudra standing at its side, heard Enki say, side wall, standing at my left side, side wall, I will speak words to you, right? This is that reed fence thing. A flood will sweep over. A decision that the seed of mankind is to be destroyed has been made, right? So it's the story. Here's in segment D, here's the flood. The flood sweeps over with the gales and waves and windstorms. Notice here, Ziud Sudra, the one of long life, drills an opening in the boat, and Utu, who is the sun god, comes in, and then he offers things. The animals disembark, onto the earth. So, I mean, like this is the early flood story. Notice here, at that time, because of preserving the animals and the seed of mankind, they settled Ziud Sudra, the king, in an overseas country in the land of Dilmun, where the sun rises. And if you think about the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh has to go to the ends of the earth, run through the tunnel, beat the sun, right? Go over the sea of death. This is the tradition. You see it in the Babylonian map of the world, right? And you see it in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is maintaining the secret lore with humanity, but keeping it away from humanity. It's you've talked about this a lot with like the Adapa myth, but this is where it starts, right? This is where we get it. So
is it you bring up some of the linguistic stuff like disembarked we have in English, we use that I know that Sumerian's not directly
right.
going to connect to the Hebrew. That would be through Akkadian.
That's right.
And so, but that whole idea, the themes are over and over, same themes we see. If I were to have you like debunk in 60 seconds, both of you, to debunk the idea that, well, actually the flood, it's a real thing. It goes back. Noah's really the true flood, and that they didn't borrow from earlier myths. It's, in fact, just because it's earlier doesn't mean it's better, number one. And number two, doesn't mean that one is the true one, or that Noah really didn't come before those and it just was written down later. Can you debunk some of this stuff for fun?
I mean, honestly, no. I'm not trying to argue that the Mesopotamian narrative is better or more accurate. I don't think there was a worldwide flood, so accuracy for me is completely irrelevant. These are literary texts. It's mythology. I find it interesting from a literary perspective. I find it interesting from a text transmission standpoint and from a cultural perspective to look at how people use literature and change it throughout history. I think saying, oh, well, just because it's older doesn't mean it's better. I don't give a fuck. I'm not saying it is better. I'm saying, isn't this interesting? You can disagree with me and say, no, it's not interesting. That's your prerogative. You don't have to find the same things intellectually interesting that I do. As far as Noah being a real person, I mean, like, there is nothing I can say that is going to dissuade someone if they truly believe that Noah was real.
Right.
I don't think he was. We have no evidence for it. Genesis is a baby compared to Sumerian literature.
I love that.
Like, it's just there's zero evidence. Even like, and the problem is that with people who think that, nothing I can say will change their minds because they think that the Hebrew Bible is divinely inspired. So it doesn't matter that there's no other evidence. The Bible is all the evidence they need because it came directly from God. Like, nothing I can present is going to change someone's minds on that. I think they're wrong. I think that's a really boring way of looking at it. And I am still a Christian, so you can hold a religious conviction and still see this as a beautiful, amazing piece of literature made by humans based on the world's oldest literary tradition. And if that's not spectacularly amazing, I really don't know what is.
Yeah. I got to turn this to you for a second here, Josh, because We did a little testimony that we never went and told the world yet. It will come. Trust me, it's coming. But you came into Assyriologist to become a Assyriologist, to learn these languages, to like vindicate and validate your faith, and to kind of withhold that Noah really is a true story. And there's a worldwide flood. And no, this didn't borrow from that earlier stuff. So coming from that angle, you know why I'm asking that question. And we see it all the time online. And Megan hit the nail on the head. Is there anything you would maybe add? Maybe a few cherries on top of what Megan said there to nail this down. Coming from a fundamentalist perspective, you get educated, your whole world starts to crumble. What would you say to some of the things I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Megan is correct that all things considered, if you believe that a text is divinely inspired and inerrant, again, all things considered, that's just, it doesn't matter what somebody else says.
Yeah.
For me and for many others that I know, the way that people have sort of broken free of that mindset is unfortunately having to be very often surrounded by people that are very educated that you trust.
It's kind of funny you said unfortunate, because what you're saying is that's not common, and I wish it was more common.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's my interpretation of your unfortunate.
So what ends up happening, I think, is that you'll say to someone, for example, I was in a conversation several weeks ago, and I brought up the thing that I brought up tonight, that, I'm not a geologist, so I can't speak to the evidence. But I can say, from an archaeological standpoint, a textual standpoint, the material culture is an unbroken tradition in Mesopotamia right on through the third millennium, right? We can like go to museums and look at the shit. And so if you're going to argue that the entire world was flooded, that don't make no sense, right? Because I mean, like, how do we go from 8 people in like 2400, right, to the Sargonic Empire in 2350? Like, that just doesn't. And of course, so the that's a real problem. And so and you recognize these things, right? Because from an evangelical standpoint, what people do with that information is, of course. If you got to Trinity Trinity Seminary, my friend Caleb, like he'll say very, very quickly, of course, this is a mythological text. This is it's doing something different. But the reason that those sorts of things develop is because the evidence, as we've talked about so many times before, Derek, the evidence butts up against this, more literal interpretation of the text. And so, the big example, and I'll be quiet, but the big example that you and I have discussed before, that Ron Hendel pointed out, and William Deaver and so many others, is, the number 600,000 fighting men in Exodus 12:37.
Right.
Well, for 2,000 years, it's 2.5 million people living in the Exodus, right? Well, then it becomes clear from Egyptologists that New Kingdom Egypt can't support that, right? There's only that many people in all of Egypt. And so the response from the evangelical community is quite often, almost always, not to say, oh, the text got that wrong, right? Instead, it's to say, 1,000 must mean something else here, right? This Hebrew word elef, it must mean like military unit, because it can mean that over in this other context. So that must be what it means here, because the text can't be wrong, right? It can't be. It's inerrant. And I think those are the types of things that it's good that we see that shift. I'm glad, in the same way that I'm glad when people say, well, this can't be real slavery, in Leviticus 25. This has to be something else, because slavery's wrong. I would much rather hear that, right, as we always talk about, then, well, maybe slavery's not so bad then.
I wish more people followed what Megan's suggesting and just finding a way to exit that bubble that you and me were in, Josh.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. It sounds to me like, Megan, you've never been a fundamentalist your entire existence.
No, and Josh and I have spoken about this many times. I think that is one of the more pertinent reasons why going to grad school didn't shake any faith that I have to the extent that it shook his. I was never taught that the Bible was fact or divinely inspired. Noah was always a mythological figure to me. So coming to grad school and learning, the Exodus didn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't think it did.
Right.
I didn't have that that realization that I think a lot of people raised evangelical seem to have when they start getting into this area of ancient history.
Sorry, again, I committed a sin and took us off track here. I just thought, why not? The final thing I'd like to do, because I don't want to keep you too long. I'm gonna just say that all humanity is going to get destroyed if you don't buy a copy of the new book. That's just outright
flood. It's coming.
And I may not be speaking.
Appease the gods, then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Appease the gods, buy the book, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Right. I'm talking to the fence. I'm Daniel writing on the wall here for everybody. The flood will come if you don't get the book. Seriously though, I'm a shameless plug, and everyone who watches this channel knows. If you can't afford it, I understand. It's about supporting the scholarship. It's about supporting to keep education getting there, to do more episodes like this so that the scholars can go, hey, I want to go out and give more information, keep educating. But the final thing I did want to get was the Sumerian flood and who the characters are. Can you give us a tease, at least what is said in the oldest flood written account that we have?
I'm going to let Josh do that. But before we go on to that, I want to say that if someone does want the book and genuinely cannot afford it, email me, digitalhammurabi@gmail.com, and we can help.
Okay.
I'd rather people have the information.
I got it. Sorry, Josh. Sorry. I know I want to hear what you have to say about the flood, but I have to just tell everybody a quick story they don't probably know about Josh and Megan. I came to their house and did some recordings a long time ago. A couple times I've shown up at their house and said, hey, can you take this homeless beggar and clean him up? And of course they said, you're welcome. And then I left 3 days later because, I'm that bad. But the point is I was, walking downstairs with him to get a coffee and noticed they had this nice Mac computer. And I was like, hey, that's a bigger version of what I already have, and it's got more memory. Is there any way I can buy this from you guys since you don't use it? Because Josh implied, like he said several times, we don't even use this down here collecting dust. And I was like, what if I could buy this from y'all? I'd love to get this Mac. This is beautiful. And I'll ask Megan how much, And so we go upstairs, we keep recording, then he goes up and it comes back and he's, Megan's not going to sell it. She's not selling it to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, no biggie. And it didn't hurt my feelings, but sucks to hear that I can't get this amazing Mac, yet she wants to give it to you. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, give to me? That's thousands of dollars. The computer brand is expensive. No, Megan wants to give. And that something about you and Megan, right, y'all are givers. You want to help. You literally are just amazing human beings on a real level. And I'm going to do it. Who cares? This computer is the one I'm using.
I think your video cable's come out.
Oh, did I unplug it?
It's the gods.
Inky, Enlil, stop.
It's definitely Enlil.
Here, I will recite a liturgy.
I gotta show them. I'm using the dang thing. How did I do that? Did I unplug I unplugged the power to the battery. That's why. Okay.
That'll do it.
When you see me again.
Okay. Yep, we got you.
This is the Mac. I should have just turned it. There you go. Boom. There's the Mac. So
there's the Mac.
So anyway, I just felt obligated to do that, to point out if people really are struggling, and you're having a hard time and you really do want to read something, they'd much rather that you do that and reach out and make contact. So I know that for a fact. I don't know why I had to tell you this story, but I just did. So
sorry, we get asked semi-regularly if you can buy the book anywhere that is not Amazon. Yes, we have an Etsy store. It's etsy.com/shop/cuneiformations.
what did I do?
They're all in there as well.
Okay, let me pop that up. Well, can you see your... Here it is. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right. It's under merchandise, correct?
It should be. There might be a link rather than.
I thought it was something. I could have swore I've gone through your website.
So I did change it recently.
Oh, okay. Shoot. I could have swore.
Oh, sorry, I have
That's
it.
why.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, send me that link after. I'll make sure that
Sure.
it's in the description for sure.
So
But
this is, sorry, I've got it.
okay, perfect.
This is it. You've got etsy.com/shop/cuneiformations, and it's got all of the books, including digital downloads for those who prefer downloads rather than physical copies.
What's that down there at the bottom?
Oh,
I make geeky cuneiform stuff as well.
Christmas is coming. You know, someone's going to want to get like little Sumerian, Akkadian. What is that?
Yeah.
Sumerian, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, those are all Sumerian.
And if you she put those together because they're at a level that if you finish book one, you're able to read them.
You can absolutely read those. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it is kind of cool to like have a puzzle or something that you know, you can
It's
be like,
fun. I like
tell
it.
your friends like, oh yeah, what that says is Shogi, the great king, you know, dedicated this object.
Well, thank you for that. And then Sumerian flood, and maybe we can do a few supers.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
please. Yes.
So
let's go.
you know, it's a very fragmentary text. So it's difficult to know specifically what's missing. Jakobsen, Seville, these guys have done editions of the text. And I know somebody's done it more recently, but you know, you have sort of a lot of the major components that you see, right? You have a creation part for humanity. You have like the division of the cities amongst the gods. Again, it's a concept that gets picked up in the Hebrew Bible as well. Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 89, or Psalm 82. So then you have you know, the oath being sworn, that you know, Ea or Enki's not going to go telling humanity, and then of course he goes and tells Ziutsudra, the Noah character of the
same characters are in it though. Ea, Enki.
Yeah, and then so Atrahasis is the one who is exceedingly wise in Akkadian. Ziutsudra means Z is life. Ufor is like time or day or whatever, and then Sud 3 is or Sutra is the adjective for like lengthy, to be long.
So they're the same character, they're just different names.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, that's right. Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Would you say? I mean, like,
oh yeah,
sure this was off the top.
Right, and then the flood comes. You have the animals, you know, that go on board, and then they disembark, sacrifice. You have Enlil coming and finding out what's happened. So a lot of the themes, or the major components of the story are present. And this is something actually, I'll land with this. Excuse me. This is something that was pointed out recently by, I think it's William Lane Craig. There are always people trying to make these arguments that, oh, well, you know, the Bible is actually the source, right? And one of the things that he's pointing out is, well, you don't have the birds until like we don't have a manuscript from the second millennium Akkadian story that preserves the birds. And that's one of the places that's like the strongest connection that you see between the Akkadian story in Tablet 12 and the Hebrew Bible. And he's like, so we only have it in the Neo-Assyrian period, which is like, 8th, 7th century. And it's like, yeah. And like, if you think that the Hebrew Bible flood story is predating, is that the argument that the whole fucking flood story that goes back? But this one part, since we don't see in a manuscript this one part preserved, it must be that the Hebrew Bible is the source for all of it. It's just such a weird argument. It makes me want to say, please stay in your lane, right, Senor Craig. But sorry,
I think that's an interesting point, because if there is no birds, let's say in the earlier ones, and then it is a relevant point of this Neo-Assyrian empire or Neo-Assyrian mythology here. Well, the Assyrians kind of conquered Israel and just kind of made impact on these people.
And the book of Deuteronomy is like kind of based on, that like these are had in succession treaty. Like it's
and your guys' name is kind of something to do with Hammurabi. I don't know why, but so let's do some super chats. And then I want to make sure I made my vote different to make, get people's, hey, have you got the book? Have you got the book? Vote in the vote thing. There's 105 votes right here. And if you just purchased the book, will you drop a comment? Let us know, because I'm curious to hear how many people watching this stuff actually are following through and participating in helping the academics, but also wanting to educate themselves. I love seeing a comment of, I just got the book. I'm excited to see where this goes and those type of things. So interested to see what you say. Mark Rothenbuehler, forgive me if I butchered that. Before the show is over, we're going to need a Dr. Josh imitation of Kent Hovind talking about these earlier than Noah flood stories. Can you go get Kent?
Yeah, he's just gone to see if he's available.
Okay.
It might take a minute or two.
He's still living with y'all?
He comes and goes.
Yeah. Y'all are too friendly, I tell you.
Well, he drinks all the coffee, so.
Oh, okay, okay.
He leaves my tea alone, so I'm okay. But Josh does occasionally wake up to find that all the coffee's gone.
Oh my gosh.
He's
poor
very, very inconsiderate. It just, and with a house guest, like, you expect maybe they let you know that they've drunk all your coffee so that you can go and get some more. No, you just find out, and it's Kent. Right. You have to tell someone. You absolutely have to tell someone. I think he's just coming.
Oh, is he? Okay,
I think so,
good.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. He's actually going to give us his presents.
I know. It's
interesting.
I think we got him out of bed. It's taking a minute.
Okay. That.
What's the issue here? You guys need me to come and whack on some atheists? Okay.
I would really rather you didn't. They're asking about the flood.
Hey, how you guys doing? Ken Hovind here. I taught high school science for 15 years, and so I'm here to help you atheists with all your problems. Okay. So what can I do for you? You want to know about the flood? I'll tell you about the flood. So of course we know that water rained down on the otters. Okay. And of course, God in his infinite wisdom, proving that evolution to be the dumbest religion that I think you could probably figure out. Derek's over there laughing. He's probably like that godless engineer in those 15-foot whale penises. Are you a pervert or something there?
Yes.
All right, look, I don't have time to spend with you people here. I'm going to have to go and read my Bible. As you said, it's a basic instructions before leaving Earth. Okay, so get my 67-part video series, only $99.95 each. Okay, all right, I'm here to help. Yeah.
But But
He's gone. He's gone.
yeah, he does that, doesn't he? Do that?
Pops in and just monologues for a while and then disappears again.
That's
quite disconcerting. Very disconcerting.
I do wonder. I do wonder if that's how his relationships work. It seems. Oh my gosh, he's too good at that. He's too good at that.
I'd say it's the product of a lot of practice, but he's just a genuinely good mimic.
Yeah,
like zero practice goes into this.
Thanks, Kent.
Yeah,
that guy is weird.
Yeah, he's a strange guy.
I messed with my bow tie.
Rude.
Did he? He messed with it when he walked by?
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm kind of, so a lot of people want to hear from him. I'm kind of sick of him. This is every time it comes on. It's weird.
Well, I mean, it's the evangelical Christian thing. They have some very odd sexual hang-ups sometimes.
Yeah.
So
that's weird. But why whales?
I don't know.
Because they're big? Who knows? Ike, thank you so much for the super sticker. Ike, if you're still here, seriously, thank you. Appreciate the love. Heng Fashi, who handles Mesopotamian mythology better? Star Trek writers using Gilgamesh in Inge's Darmok or Mike Mignola's Hellboy graphic novels?
This is like the perfect moment.
I mean, to my eternal shame, I've actually not read Hellboy. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Sorry. But what am I plugging?
But the reading podcast.
Reading Party podcast? Oh, that's true. So one of the other podcasts that I host is called the Reading Party podcast. We are a media review podcast and we concentrate on books, films, TV inspired by the ancient world. So
on your channel?
No, it has its own channel, which is why no one actually has heard of it.
What's the name of it? I'll try and pull it up. If it's
the Reading Party podcast. I do it with a classics friend of mine. But I am adding Hellboy to our reading list because that would be really, really fun and cool. But I don't have an answer. I'm sorry.
Reading Party podcast. How did I
do love Star Trek though. So if I don't remember that particular episode, I know I've seen it because I've seen all of Next Generation.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Dumbledore solo as well. So
I'm subscribed already, so I must have at some point in the past.
We're filming our second season or recording our second season at the moment, so that'll come out in starting January 16th. So everything's a bit quiet at the moment, but we're doing Egyptian mythology and history and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you answering that. Another one by Hangfa. Thank you. Now that I'm out of it, it seems easy to see how what?
I think that's preposterously.
Okay, preposterously out of line with objective observations of reality.
Observations
are. So I'm wondering if there's any record or evidence of there being a Mesopotamian Christopher Hitchens. Do you ever hear in these ancient anywhere that they're controversial to the gods, or they wouldn't even put that into?
No, the closest you get is accusations of people not listening to the gods or not doing what the gods are commanding, and that is often given as a reason for a dynasty failing or a king being defeated in battle. Oh well, he didn't follow the omens, he didn't do what the gods told him to do, but you don't really get a hint of he didn't believe in the gods.
Right. That's an interesting question, actually a really good question to kind of think about. But yeah, if there's no sign of actual disbelief, that's interesting.
Well, something that has come up a few times on the podcast with Bart is that ancient religions weren't so much a matter of belief or faith, they were a matter of what you did and how you lived your life. And not believing in the gods just wasn't really a thing.
Right.
You didn't have to believe in them, they were just there. And what mattered was, did you perform sacrifices correctly? Did you follow omens correctly? Did you live correctly in the manner that the gods expected you to? So I think that's probably why it took a while for secularism or lack of belief or atheism or however you want to frame it to really kind of come into the fore.
That point you're making is like you can think what happens with grace and faith and Christianity, and we start interpreting the ancient world through that lens, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
Robin Webster, Megan and Dr. Josh together, awesome. Derek, thank you, Robin. Appreciate the super chat there, and sorry misspelled your name, Derek. I'm so used to it, you don't have to apologize. I appreciate the support, but I'm literally used. In fact, I almost start believing in miracles again when people get it right. So, you know,
I do actually double check before I message you. Am I using the correct spelling of Derek? Because I will consistently get it wrong if I don't check.
There's DERR, there's DARIK, there's DERE. There's so many. I don't.
I get people adding extra vowels and an H in mine quite regularly. I'm like, no, just
right.
Mine's the boring spelling.
Thank you so much, Robin. And then Hangfa again, is there a follow-up update to Dr. Bruce Wells and his work on the idea that Adam and Eve were oblates in a temple garden? That was fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating, and I've looked a couple of times and haven't seen anything yet.
He's getting
academic work takes a while to come to fruition, though, so that's not terribly surprising.
He's getting ready to put out one of the Cambridge companion volumes on law in the Hebrew Bible. So I don't know if that's taken up a bunch of his time, but yeah, I'm as excited as anybody to see it. Maybe we can reach back out to him and get an update.
So as we're closing out, I'm going to check and see what the poll looks like. How many of you have buckled during the stream and decided, I'll get the book. Where's it at? Here it is. Learn to Read Ancient Sumerian, an Introduction for Complete Beginners, Volume 2. Let me know if you got that. I'm going to go ahead and let's do a countdown. Give people a second to vote.
Are we counting or are you counting?
I don't know. That's why I was pausing. I was kind of curious to know. Should I do it, or should I do like a 5-second one?
You do it, because I don't want to mess it up.
I don't know how to count because I don't math good.
Right. Hold on. Can you count in Sumerian? Do you know how to pronounce it properly?
Let's see.
If I get the book up, then yes.
I know pronunciation's kind of a difficult.
I can do it forwards, but that's not helpful.
I wonder if we know exactly how they pronounced.
So pronunciation is a whole different question. I do actually have an interview on the channel going into how we know. What we know about the pronunciation of Sumerian. The answer is we're relatively certain on some things, not so much on others, but there's a lot of bilingual texts that give us Akkadian and Sumerian together. So you get the pronunciation of the Akkadian, and we know Akkadian pronunciation because it's a Semitic language and very closely related to Hebrew and Aramaic and all that kind of thing. So very quick answer, much more complicated than that.
And while you're getting I just do 5 up, like 5 seconds.
No.
Sumerian. But I am the atheist preacher. Sell. You bet your ass. And I'll tell you why. I know how to run a business, and I know exactly how to help popularize. And you can ask any academic, why do they come to MythVision? I'm a shameless plug. And the reason I have no shame is because I know what I'm doing is going to be for the betterment of educating and helping more people. So people who can't do it, please don't feel obligated. If you can help out, awesome. That's the way I look at it. So you're absolutely right, Baruch. I have no shame in my game, and it's why we're successful in helping more academics want to popularize the ideas that they learn in academia for general audiences, and they want to take that stuff mainstream. So, anyway.
Okay, I have the numbers if you want to count down.
Oh, you want me to do it?
Oh, no, I was going to do it for you.
Okay, so I'll do just 1.
In Sumerian?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay.
Right?
So 1 dish.
2.
Min.
3.
Esh.
4.
Limu.
5.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we have to check, right? I made you do the countdown. Okay. Let me stop the poll, and let's see how many people voted. There was 201 votes, I think.
That's pretty good.
Wow.
No. That was the previous one. Here it is. Sorry, 125 votes. Apology. Good idea. I will. 75% of people said, hey, I will get the book. And 23% said, of course.
Nice.
So
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, it always makes the scholars feel good too. That's another reason I like to help out.
I think academics are very bad at both communicating their work to people who are not academics, and then also telling people to go and buy their books because it feels weird. It feels very weird. But we both believe very heavily in what we're doing, and that's why we're here, really.
That's why I have to be the guy.
Absolutely. That's why it's why we have a Derek.
Right.
I can't do it. Josh can't do it.
I'm not offended by it because I don't know. I don't feel like, I don't know. I guess I'd feel a certain way when people make those comments. I was like, yeah, I am. That's what I do. Yeah.
The thing is, if you didn't believe in or find value in the thing that you're selling, I think that's a very different thing. I think if it's something that you actually think, no, this is worth publicizing, this is something that people will be interested in and find value in, I think that's different. Yeah,
and look, complete transparency is like, I'll use an affiliate link through Amazon where they give me like chump change, literally, for every book. Anyone who ever purchases anything from the scholars, it helps gas by the end of the month for the car. But it literally only does that. And my point is like, it's really just the value of seeing the scholars feel appreciated and feeling like I didn't do this in vain. I didn't do this where nobody's reading my stuff, because the work that goes into even my scripts, which are 8, 12,000, 15,000 words that I craft and script myself, you're doing this at 150, 250,000 words. And what? So 50 to 150 people read it? Are you kidding me? No, I know the kind of work that you're going into is beyond my imagination with the scripts that I'm producing just based on other academics' works to create these documentaries and stuff. And that's why there's just so much that I know I have no shame in any of it.
We both really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for being great scholars and giving us your time and coming out here. We did get a few supers at the last second here, just saying, I find the Gilgamesh flood story more interesting. Fear of death, horror of immortality. We all love that. Following the letter rather than the spirit. Remorse from lying. Noah, OTOH.
On the other hand.
Huh?
On the other hand.
On the other hand, don't free will wrong.
Yeah. Don't you use your free will in an inappropriate manner.
Oh. Thank you, Jeffrey, for the super. And then liberal conspiracy with the 666. Thanks, Kent, for straightening out these godless heathens.
Someone has to.
Somebody's got to do it. That's why we keep him in the basement.
And he drinks your coffee. You got to do something about that.
Yeah, telling you.
Thanks for your coffee.
I love you, both of you. Let's do this again. By the way, shameless plug, get the books, all that stuff. But we're also working on some documentaries. And this will be also another shameless plug to promote the work of Dr. Joshua Bowen and Megan Lewis. And it is just really fun making these documentaries because they're really pretty and we put a lot of work into them. So stay tuned for more of that. We got one on Gilgamesh we're working on, question mark on when that might be done, but others we'll be working on as well. So any final words from y'all? Like anything?
No, just thank everybody for watching. It was it's a lot of fun.
No, masses of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not even going to do an outro. They're too cool. They're too cool for school for the outro. Oh gosh, last minute. Hi, Derek. Are you aware of the channel Exploring the Quran and the Bible? Yes, I am. It's a great channel, very much in the spirit of your own. Yeah, scholar, great scholar, interviewing Muslim academics or Islamic scholars. Sorry, because they're not all Muslim. And doing it from a critical standpoint. So thank you, Stop Scamming Man. I really appreciate it. I've interviewed him, by the way, the host of that channel. But thank you. Love y'all. And have a good night on the East Coast. I know it's late over there.
Thank you.